So the regular contact definitely helped, but also different formats that we tried out that were bringing people together. But what seemed to be very important in case of our network was this intrinsic sort of motivation. So motivation that was coming from the members. So there was always, because of this emotional connection, people wanted to bring something of their own to the network, and they wanted to really create something. And the network was allowing this. So if there were formats that people wanted to bring, whether that was a festival, a dinners format, or salon that we called, people were bringing it, and people were given space, physical, financial support often, to go with those formats and to try them out, and sometimes to fail or sometimes to succeed greatly. And of course, I think in terms of our network, what helped was that the programs people were coming through to the network were kind of good funded, long-term, and people had time to build some sort of identity together throughout those programs. And of course, that changed quite a lot in the past 2 years when we had to switch online, and we are still struggling and still trying to grasp how to enable relationship building online. And we want to, of course, keep some in-person formats, and we want to develop some online formats. And on one hand, it is a challenge because it's difficult to find a format in which people can connect, but members kept giving us ideas. And the most recent idea I just wanted to share, and we haven't tried that out yet, but is digital campfire. I don't quite know how to arrange a digital campfire, but campfires seem to be something that people really enjoyed in a physical space. And this is where those sharings and relationship building was happening. And now they suggested to have it in a digital format. So I'm really curious how we can pull that off. And I'll definitely let you know when we do. But we realized also that this challenge posed an opportunity for us too. So we can really make the knowledge sharing more inclusive. We can reach to more people at the same time. And it's also less expensive. So the money we save on, let's say, traveling, we can really put into creating those formats and bringing people together. So this is the evolution at MitOst in a nutshell. And Katie, what about your network? What evolved? What changed in the way you see the members' motivation for engagement?
Sure. I think maybe the first thing was simply I was thinking about it in this kind of a way, as opposed to perhaps assuming it or assuming that I knew what it was, or and probably COVID has been interesting in that. So my network is a network of career changer teachers. I run something called Now Teach, and it's still we're relatively new, so it's still relatively small. But in the first year, it was really very small, just 45 people. Everybody knew everybody's name. Everybody liked each other. And so instinctively, it was easy to just make these people were friends. They were doing this difficult thing together, and they didn't really need much external thing. And I think we got some things right in there, but kind of instinctively. So for example, whenever we brought them together, there would be something they would take away in a kind of learning, knowledgey kind of fashion, just like you were talking about. But we always gave them warm wine and warm pizza, became our kind of trademark. And the whole point really was to get them together and build the relationships and the friendships. But you're also aware that at the end of a busy working day, they sort of almost need something slightly more concrete than that to be, to be the sort of bread lure, if you like, to get to the warm wine and pizza, which was always the most important part. And so then those relationships, like you were saying, completely crucial, and this sense of shared experience and vision, because they were all doing this slightly crazy thing all together and could kind of get it in a way that other people perhaps couldn't. But I think what I didn't see in those early years, because there it all was that, of course, there were some people who weren't coming to those things, some people who felt very differently to the people who were coming. And then as it grew and we went online, there was kind of really needing to understand, just like you said, Marta, kind of how engaged are different people, maybe being more honest than was always comfortable. I thought Now Teach was the most important thing, and probably for them all, it was not the most important thing. And so it was trying to figure out, what different people were engaged for what slightly different reasons. And one of the challenges we've had, probably like everybody, is our attendance has gone shooting up at events, but honestly, they're less interesting and the relationships are less good. The thing itself, the talk or whatever, is good, but the relationship building doesn't really happen in the same way. So you're getting more people, but you're perhaps having less impact. How do you square that? But I think the things that I want to hold on to that we did well were this thing of purpose, relationships, something about kind of credibility, sort of almost exclusivity. Perhaps it's the brand, you know, you really belong to a thing and it means something to people beyond the network as well. And to be celebratory. What we have had to do, of course, is to evolve. You know, at the beginning it was all about getting people into teaching. Now it's supporting them in teaching. So the vision has changed with that and the purpose. And sometimes it feels a little less clear on what do you do about that. And the language becomes murky. And, you know, what do we exactly mean by this, that, or the other? So, but I think in the really simplest answer, my thinking has changed just by not assuming stuff, you know, not by hearing what the loudest people think and assuming that they are the voice of the network, but trying to dig a little bit deeper. I'll also give you my bigger evolution. What do you think you've done? What do you think you've done badly, Marta? Not you, the organization. Like, what was a mistake? What should we not do?
That is always a hard question. And I think I tried to reflect on this a little bit recently. And I think that in terms of a concrete format, I don't have one that I could share with you that didn't work out. I can definitely say that when we tried to bring the whole festival that up to a certain moment was happening offline, online, it really did not encourage people to participate. And we lost a lot of people over this. So having an online festival was not a great success. But I think more importantly, somehow because the organization was going through a transformation process, we really wanted to engage members and we wanted to ask their opinion. We found that important. And we engaged in a process that was very long and very energy consuming. And a lot of people just dropped out because of that. They sort of got disconnected because it was too much, too overwhelming. So I think we were lacking clarity of what we want from them and what we offer to them as well. And that should have really come much earlier. And the communication was very irregular. So it was sort of like reaching the advice when we needed it, but it was not on a regular basis. So people sometimes didn't know what was happening really. And I think reliable, accessible formats are the key. So let it be a meeting under a theme every month, and maybe one month you have 5 people, the other month you have 50 people, but still people know that there is something they can cling to if they want to connect with the community. Yeah, and I think we also abandoned that because we were so consumed by the process of this transition that we forgot to take care of our communities, basically. I think this is a big lesson, and we are very much struggling to really plan the next year in a way that will allow us to not do the same mistakes.
I think that's so interesting. I think we've done just the same. We've grown into a national organization just during the same period as COVID. And I think we've sort of experimented with this, and then we overthink and overthink and overthink, and we think we know what's going on, but that doesn't mean that there are people on the outside who are only going to give it so much time. And I think that's a real lesson. How do you think really hard, make it look as though everything's just happening?
Exactly.
It's that really curious thing. I think the other thing that's been a big shift for me, which I know we've talked about at these kind of forums before, but was just at the beginning, I kind of thought it was my job to motivate them and make it all happen. Then we went through a phase of being like, oh no, networks need to be self-sustaining and blah, 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 and they need to be led by the members. They must just do it. And then we'd all sit there going, oh, well, bloody hell, they keep asking us to do stuff for them. Why aren't they just doing it? You know, they're supposed to be a network. And now we've come back kind of mid-circle, perhaps, to be like, they need to lead it. They need to, but we need to do the really boring stuff and the awkward bits and anything time consuming that is not gonna, and it's in our interest to serve them and do, you know, so it's a balance. And maybe we need to seed the idea of the cool thing that they sort of are vaguely interested in, and we can start it off and let's see where it goes. To be honest, I think, Brendan, you've done that a bit today. You know, you've invited some people to co-host it who were slightly like, really, what? And you've done all the hard work for us. And here we are pretending we're co-hosting, because we kind of are, but also you've seeded a thing and now you'll persuade other people to do it. And maybe in a year it just happens. And I think I'm learning just from seeing you do this, how, you know, my motivation would not have been to say to write to you and say, could I please co-host an event? But when you ask me, sure. And I think that's an interesting thing to have noticed.
Always, and please, the team do give us a warning in the time, because we were saying that Callum and I might be here for forever if we are not being told to shut up at some point. So do remind us. But yeah, absolutely.
So maybe I can start, and then I can kind of pass over a wee bit to you, Jan, and feel free to ask questions as we go. So when I was first asked to do this, the first example I had of a network that I was building, and it was right at the very beginning of my career, it was a coalition of services in the community that were providing support for folks with mental health issues and addiction issues. And I hadn't really done anything like that before. And all the members of this network, none of them were paid to be there. And I remember wanting to make it as easy as humanly possible for every single one of those members to be there. And so I remember the member meetings that we would have. I would put on the food, I would have note takers, I would base the experience on how much they liked me, maybe not like how we were achieving impact, but how happy they were, what their satisfaction levels were. I wanted all the work to happen in the meetings themselves, because I was very used to hearing that everyone was really busy and they didn't have much time to do collaboration. And so I really focused a lot on helping them with that and fixing that problem for them. And I think on reflection, it's interesting, like lots of them are motivated to come, but did that motivation kind of translate into impact? I'm really not sure. I think a lot of them still I have connections with, but did we achieve the things that we wanted to achieve as a network? If I'm being really honest with myself, probably not. And I think in retrospect as well, I made it really easy for them to not have to come to the meetings, because everything was done for them. If they missed the meeting, no one would care if they were there or not. So it was a really interesting beginning, I think.
Yeah. Well, I'll just follow up on that, because I think it is a balancing act, isn't it? Like on one hand, you do need to make sure that you meet people where they are at. And I think, a lot of us work with, as you say, like volunteers who are very busy and have all other responsibilities, other social pressures on that. And so kind of like expecting them to be actively involved when, for example, they have to work 3 jobs to make ends meet, or, young people who are studying, etc. But I think the flip side of it is, yes, that people want are motivated by actually having a purpose. And one of the things that when we were talking, or like having purpose that is a shared purpose, like why are we here together, but also like individual kind of, I guess, specific ways of kind of contributing to that purpose. And what I found quite helpful, I know some of you who are here would have seen the book from Sharath, and in terms of the intrinsic motivation. And I found, actually, I revisited it kind of preparing for today. And I found it quite helpful, the 3 kind of areas that he talks about with the purpose, agency, and mastery. And I think it's kind of hitting those 3 things, really. Like the purpose, I think, that's something we also talk about with alumni networks at inHive, is that kind of having a clear vision or purpose for the organization. And so with your network that you described, I think it maybe have been a clear kind of like, why are we in this together? But I think for a lot of alumni networks, it might not be so clear. And there's a lot of work to be done to clearly to clearly identify that, so that people do feel that it's not only coming to social events for our school or for our program, but there is something more that will make us.
I love that thought. And that's been a lot of my learning and a lot of my kind of, I'm going to say chilling out, because I was a lot more anxious at the beginning of my career, is that the building to that is the process of motivation in itself. So I think it's almost like we think we can't really do anything until we have our purpose. But I believe that like the building the motivation, the building of the connections in the network is getting to the purpose. Because how do you get to the purpose? How do you know why you're really there? Well, you are listening to your network members, you're building connections with them, you're understanding their deep self-interest, their community interest, what they need to progress in their careers or in their movements with the people that they know. And so that process of building is building motivation, so I'm always this like, well, we can't move until we have the purpose, but actually the building of the purpose is actually the building of the movement. I don't know if that resonates.
Yeah, no, that makes a whole lot of sense, I think. And then the other kind of the other side of that is about, you know, creating the structures and the almost, I don't want to call it a culture, but like that kind of, I guess, atmosphere or whatever you want to call it, where people feel like that they can have those conversations, they can go on that journey where it is participatory, where it's about listening. Because I think the flip side of it, you know, with a lot of us who are kind of in a, like, let's say in organizational leaderships and are running programs, or like networks are part of like our programmatic work, there is a lot of the things around, you know, we have to meet certain targets and we have to show certain impact and we have to have certain metrics to show. And I think that is really disempowering and sometimes can take away, like you kind of stop seeing, you know, the journey, and you're not allowing people to do that because you feel that pressure that, you know, like I have to show that we did X, Y, and Z, that these are all the outputs, but in a way that is demotivating for people. So I think it's kind of, yeah, just finding the right balance. And I know we can't get away from needing to show impact, and showing impact is actually motivating as well. So it's kind of a chicken or egg thing, but just finding the right balance.
I think there are indicators that we, and I suppose that's for a different conversation for a different day, but there are indicators that we can, there are different indicators we can use for that process to show our impact kind of during that journey. I was going to share just a personal story about the network that I run now. So it's for a new type of health worker, and the reason they're hired is because they have a mental health issue, because they have an addiction, and it's really interesting for me. And I think intrinsically, I personally believe, and I suppose there's no such thing as an organic belief or value, but I have felt what motivates me is being able to connect with others that have my shared experience. And I am so ultra motivated to do that because I want to be understood, and I want to be, I just want to be around others who know what it's like to be me. And so I know that's why a lot of our networks start, but we can't underestimate that. I think that I will seek people out specifically because I wonder, you know, I know that they know what it's like to be a teacher, they know what it's like to be a social worker, or have the same experience, or want to be an entrepreneur. And so that's the motivation piece. And so we don't want to underestimate that people do just want to spend time with other people who know what it's like to be there. And it's pretty magic that you don't actually have to do much introduction of yourself if that person's been on the same experience with you. I don't know if you would agree, Jan.
Yeah, I think that is really interesting. I think it goes back to the whole kind of like, why are we in this together? Like, what is the purpose of the network? Because if it, you know, I think the sense of belonging and the relationships are definitely part of every network. But in terms of, you know, what are some of the other priorities, excuse me, or areas of work of the network, I think that you know, shape the context. I think the other thing I would maybe bring in, is also, I think what I found very helpful, or like when we talk about motivation, is the kind of, again, kind of finding the right balance, what you were saying before, in terms of like the self-interest of people, or like, why are we here? And I think a lot of the networks that I would be supporting, you know, like scholarship recipients, young people, like alumni, etc., it's about like, well, we have all these things to give people, like, right? Like there are all these like trainings that they are putting on for them. And like, so why aren't they motivated to come if there are all these benefits? Like, we are doing this in their interest. And again, like going to Shara's book, I found very interesting this kind of idea of this hygiene factors, like your pay, or like the fun, like the money that you get for the work. And it's crucial, like that has to be there, but it is not the only thing that will allow you to do it. Like you know, so I think a lot of the times, you know, we focus on the hygiene factors, like the kind of the self-interest, but then lose the side of the bigger things, like for example the sense of belonging and being with other people, which is maybe, you know, something we don't operate with as much because we focus on this, like, oh well, I'm giving you all this skills training, or I'm giving you all these opportunities to network to get the next job. But I think what you're saying, the kind of the soft relational things
I suppose those things are not real without a relationship. Like I almost think like, what's the catch, right? Like, because I think that's the way I'm taught to think of like, you're offering me, are you really, but okay, but they're only for the high flyers or the most amazing people in that network. And I think we need the relationship and the belonging, and I suppose it's personal belief, to actually believe that that actually could be for us, and that those opportunities are available. I always think it is interesting, like you say, yeah, and we have these opportunities sometime in our network and we're like, oh my God, I wish I was in this network so I could take advantage. What's wrong with you? And it's like, but you know, we're humans who connect with other humans. Not everyone loves connecting with an institution, especially if it's a pretty new one and isn't hugely established with a huge brand, right?
Yeah, I think the caring relationships, like this is kind of, again, maybe reflecting more. And like, I think some of it is not only about networks and motivating network members, but I think kind of like team management, or like, you know, even in an organizational level, I think like the relationships of care and expressing care for other people, like that really goes a long way, that you feel like somebody like really wants to help you. And so I really, you know, when you talk about relational power, I think that is so important, because on one hand, it also motivates people to say, well, I know this person cares and like have supported me in the past. Like, I'm not saying that it's like you're guilt stripping somebody to be a member, but there is that kind of a pull, right? Like you have that personal investment in that relationship and you feel you want to give back because somebody has cared for you. And I've seen it in the teams that, you know, not to put my inHive colleagues on the spot, but I think that's one of the things that we do as our team. Like I think that motivates us as well to come. Like I know that like this other person cares and is supported, and hopefully we share that with one another. So not to say that anyone in the chat has to say whether that is true or not from our team, but I at least, that's how I perceive it, that helps us as well.
Maybe I can share with to end with a really quick demonstration of relational power. And the way I describe relational power is my dad is a big amateur dramatics fan. So he loves musicals and amateur dramatics. And I think they're a bit boring, but no offense to anyone who does amateur dramatics, because my dad likes it and everyone likes their own thing. And I would never personally choose to go to an amateur dramatics kind of production. But every year my dad will be in his play and he will tell me to come, and I will spend the money to come to that show. And the audience is filled with people in that audience. And I'm sure not everyone in that audience loves amateur dramatics, but because their family member or friend is on that stage, we're doing that. And it's because my dad has really great relational power over me. I am not going to be outed it from the family if I don't go, but it's because of the relational power he has, and I'm happy to do that because I want him to be happy too, and I think we can apply that to our networks as well. We'll end there. Thank you so much. Some of the reflections have been amazing in the chat, and I think it should set us up really well for the breakout groups.